welcome to Lines and Spaces. I'm Jason.
And I'm Micaela.
This week we are joined by an awesome guest, Mr. Michael Norris, who Micaela and I have worked with back in our Temple days, actually not too many months ago. So, Mr. Norris, who are you?
Oh, boy, that's a great question. I hope I have the right answer. Uh, I I am happy to be on the staff at Temple, teaching the bookend classes. I have to say, for the last beginning my 16th year doing this, uh, uh, teaching the freshman class, very first class with my friend and colleague, Dr. Suzanne Hall. We do the AML class, which happens to be the freshman first class that they have at Temple. And then fast forward, my other responsibilities are to teach the senior seminar class, which is, I get a chance to see everyone and visit them in their last semester during their student teaching and support them through their work. So it's so great to see them from the beginning, their tremendous growth as people and about to enter into the in-service world. And so that's it in a nutshell.
And what an honor it was to be bookended by Mr. Norris. First days at Temple and last days at Temple. To be supported by Mr. Norris was definitely a crucial part of me getting my degree.
Oh, well, we do it all together.
Absolutely. With that, we would love to talk a little bit about what some of our first days looked like. These could be first days of our time studying and training for music education. These could be first days of student teaching, first days of actual teaching, which Jason and I are approaching our first full-time teaching gigs. But Jason, you want to start us off? What was your first day experience like?
I will start with my first day soon. So, as Mr. Norris and Micaela have both mentioned, my first day of college music at that PreService track was in AML, assessment for music learning. That's what the acronym stands for. Cool. And that course was, of course, taught by Mr. Norris here, and that definitely got me thinking about music ed in ways that I wasn't thinking about before. It kind of leapfrogged me into my journey at Temple and beyond, kind of what I was thinking philosophically and both technically of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to become as an educator, and then towards the end, bookending that. And then my first couple of days of being at school, haven't taught too many or seen too many students yet around, have been very exciting. I kind of felt like walking into this new position was almost like going to a new college, because there was so much professional development that I had to go through, meeting new teachers, meeting existing faculty, getting situated, getting my own desk, getting my ID figured out, passwords, all that tech stuff. Kind of felt like I was going back to school. Well, I guess I am going back to school, but that's a brief summary of my first days. But yeah. Micaela?
Yeah, so I think mine were similar. My first day of experience with music education was in AML with Mr. Norris, and the world of music education is the world of acronyms. So yeah, I remember distinctly sitting in that class and listening to Mr. Norris tell us about kind of some of what we could expect and some of what we were going to cover in the class, and just listening to the passion that Mr. Norris spoke with about his job and about what he does made me realize, like, in that moment, that this is so where I'm supposed to be. Like, this is definitely the right field, and this is what I was built for, even though the journey ahead was pretty challenging in all of the right ways. So that was my first day in that sense. My first day of student teaching was both over and underwhelming, because there was just a lot of me observing, and as well as a fair amount of mini lesson teaching all within the first day. So it was interesting, and of course it happened during a pandemic, so there was a lot of actually at that time all of the students were online, So that was a strange experience to be making my first impression with these students through a screen, and some of them were just little boxes that it was just their names. Sometimes it wasn't even a name, so it was a strange experience. And then still patiently awaiting my first day in my own classroom for my full-time teaching position, but I'm looking forward to that, meeting all these new students. But Mr. Norris, please share with us some of your first day experiences.
Oh, first day experiences. I'm still living through my first days starting back, and my heart pounds. I wonder if I can still, make that first impression. I have always loved beginning school years, and I've always been scared to death of them because just understanding um, more and more about human behavior and thinking things through. Uh, everyone, uh, how important first impressions are. And we as human beings are going to go into a new experience as a student into a class. They're going to be sit back and look and listen, and they're going to make a decision very quickly or on like within the first 10 minutes of what's this going to be like? What's this person like? Do I fit in? Am I going to like this? And you're going to make a first impression that is really going to be, I don't want to say fixed, but it's going to be there. And then everything else they're going to make decisions based on their first impression. And that to me is one of the most daunting parts because by the nature of the definition, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and you want to make that the most positive, inviting, and then we move together from there. And I always think that through and spend an awful lot of time thinking that through. What's it like? I want the room order to be like, and everything in order. So, and especially, knowing how important that is. And from there, we move together. So I think that topic is huge each and every year. And, I've opened up a lot of school years, and I still feel that pressure each and every year. And one other thought before we go on, it is I am constantly reminded how much energy it takes to start a school year. All the administrivia, all the things you have to get done to get things rolling, and you still have those faces in front of you that you just want to get together and make it the best possible experience. It all starts to roll nicely, but in those first couple of weeks and maybe leading up to that, I always lose sleep over this time.
Yeah. I know something that we'll probably touch on a little later in our podcast, but just something you said reminded me of when I was introducing myself to students for student teaching. I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, like, what are they going to think? Are they going to think, wow, she's such a dork? Like, she's talking about The Office and, like, these things. And it's so strange to switch sides like that, to be on the teaching side and be wondering, oh my goodness, what kind of an impression am I making for these students? Are they going to want to listen to me after I've spoken to them for the first time? Are they going to want to come to class with me? And so it's just interesting, that transition from being on the student side to being on the teaching side. Of course, you're still learning like a student would on the teaching side, but you're also instructing classes and taking the lead on those things.
Well, one of the things...
Definitely. Sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
It's all good. No, I was kind of going off of some of those ideas as well, kind of that you're talking, that transitional period of going from teacher to student, happening a little bit during my student teaching, and now going into this position you're like expected to be like the expert in the field, kind of. And I got to meet a parent and a student to do a quick little intro type of thing. And the questions that they were kind of asking me that I answered, I think successfully, really kind of gave me that pressure of like, oh yeah, I'm the one in charge of doing this now. Like I am the person who's in charge of this curriculum, this idea, and kind of taking that step into that field of like, yeah, you're kind of like that. You're not, of course, like going into our first year. I still have so much stuff to learn, but I can't sound like I have a lot to learn. I kind of had to be confident. I had to be cheerful and be excited to kind of welcome everybody in, even though in the back of my head, I just really want to like, break down and be like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. So it is definitely weird to kind of having to use that confidence that I gained and using the experience and stories that I've heard from my colleagues and my peers and even some of our professors back at Temple to kind of help me along the way of kind of making sense of everything and talking about it in a professional and confident manner, even though I don't have the years of experience to kind of really back me up, and using that to kind of help facilitate where how I interact with both colleagues and students and also teachers.
Yeah, it is, and we revisit that each year when we realize how important our students see us in helping them think through important things in their lives. And you always hear you have to, just as Jason said, you have to come off with confidence, or you're not going to be. You want them to believe you and believe in you. And then I always have the feeling that once you do that, and then you used to hang up the phone and think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I just promised this. I want to take them through this, and think, oh my gosh. And then you start questioning yourself, which is great. It's part of the process, and something that is very real and human, and I think very connecting with students. That students read people better than we think. They want to believe, and if you give them the impression that you believe in them and you're going to work together, that is everything you want to achieve. We don't know what the results are going to be. We hope we can deliver, but the more important thing is we've just made a connection that we're going to work together. And that is, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah. And I kind of want to talk about that student perspective as well, because we, of course, have we're 18 months, pandemic is still kind of happening. And talking about from that student perspective, a lot of students are going to be starting either their first day at the school or their first day like in a classroom again. And how that for them it's also kind of like a new experience, and having to keep that in mind as we are all stepping into our first days with students and other colleagues is the students are probably just as excited or even scared and nervous as you are, and being that voice of confidence, being like reassuring, and though scary to do that, is going to be very helpful in getting those students on board with what you're offering them, what you're going to be doing within your class. And I've always said like music teaching has such a great way to connect students because of both its field and the art form that we teach, and getting them connected and getting that student-centered perspective, thinking about just because, I mean, they're at least for Michaela and I, and also even you, Mr. Norris, kind of stepping into that first day, we're still close enough to the experience of being a student that we can pull on those experiences and kind of bring those into the classroom when we're planning and stuff, so that we're kind of preparing ourselves to think about, oh, the students are probably also thinking this, so I should address it this way, or something like that, and pulling on our experiences to both back up what we are saying, what the students are thinking as well.
Well, it's a common acknowledgement that we are all humans and we are all vulnerable. And if we can work together with that, then we are all stronger together. And I think that's where a student can buy ownership into the class, because they're going to make a decision. a selfish decision. Can Micaela help me with this? My teacher, my new teacher, Micaela, and and that response that you generate and give them, yeah, she can. This is awesome. I've got a new home here. I have some hope. This is going to be cool. I like my teacher. And that is the power of those first interactions, those first impressions that will hang with you and grow with you. And the opposite of that is, nah, it's not for me. And it's a long year to June. It's a long year to have that, not that positive interaction.
Yeah, definitely.
I kind of want to talk about a little bit of the pre-service side of like new students entering into that music ed field, and of course, Michaela and I have both been your students in that position of like coming either fresh out of high school or coming from a different program into music ed. And I'm curious, like when you started kind of teaching this course AML, or even getting into like teaching other teachers type of
Mhm.
setting, what were kind of like your goals in kind of that respect, of pulling on your experiences, like we said before, and then applying them to new teachers, and what you wanted to, that kind of that end goal for you, that first course for new teachers to be thinking about?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a great question. And it takes me back to my August reflective time thinking, oh my gosh, can I do this again? And how, and what has changed and how can I hope to inspire? Um, but I return to some goals that I think are, um, that apply to AML, that apply to the senior seminar class, and really apply to what we want to share with young folks. And uh, I want them to, uh, as we think about when they leave our class, when the students leave our class, what do we want them to feel like and be able to do? Begin with the end in mind. So I want them to, I want to, my goal is to help them, my students, um, find and discover hope and never lose uh, hope. Uh,
Mhm.
Hope for what they want for themselves, um, discover within themselves the tenacity to go about whatever they want to do. I can do this. This hope that I can get it done. And however that comes about us on a daily basis, how can I inspire them to discover and hold on to hope is very important to me. The second is build confidence. Confidence that you, the student, and me, everyone, will find their own path. Find their own path that, yes, I can do this. We go through periods of self doubt, and my gosh, I blew that. You know, um, that lesson that I taught was horrible, and will I have the confidence to make it better? And yes, you will, but you have to have that confidence to believe in yourself. And that's always a big goal for me, to help people find their own and discover their confidence that they will discover their own path. And the other is courage, and to be able to trust yourself that you can figure it out. And
Mhm.
we all know that we had an awful lot to figure out in the real moment in the last 2 years of how to teach, where, how,
Yeah.
adjust in the moment, and but trust our ability, um, that we can sort it out and figure it out. Not the way it was done before, but the way it needs to be right now. And one of the things that I've learned and observed just this past year is how unbelievably awesome you guys were in our class in discovering and learning how to adapt in real time. Like, you get a phone call, well, we're changing thing tomorrow. You know, that's not what you expect. And it's scary, but you guys, because we all were placed in that position, you adapted so beautifully because you dug in deep and you believed in yourself. Those are the goals that I hold on to more dearly I did when I started, that are more important, and they all have to do with the social emotional part of learning. That has probably grown in with intensity with me.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, so great to hear you kind of talk on this perspective about things, because it was so daunting thinking back to our first couple days of student teaching, kind of not knowing what that looked like, or even going into the semester being like, what's that gonna look like? Because I'm sure, Michaela, both you and I had preconceived perceptions of what student teaching was gonna look like when we
Right,
were sophomores and juniors, and
definitely.
then walking into that first day of student teaching being like, oh, so I can't do this thing that I was trained to do. I always say this to people that I've met, that me being an instrumentalist, then a tuba player, predominantly wind and band, going into student teaching my first placement and not being able to work in person with wind players or brass players, and actually instead working more closely with the string players because they were able to come in and do stuff. And I was like, wow, I'm getting a lot of string experience, which I know it's a great experience and I gained a lot out of it, but it was like such a weird dichotomy, to where I had thought originally what it was. And I'm sure, Michaela, you can probably speak on your experiences as well, kind of stepping into that weirdness on the first day of that.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of weirdness. I know I had way more experience with younger students, especially in an elementary setting. But my first student teaching placement was at a junior high, and not only was it at a junior high, it was at a particularly large junior high with students online. And my first week was just online, and then they switched into hybrid. So it was a different type of jarring experience. I think I wasn't working closely with string instrumentalists. I was working closely with a lot of students that were not very motivated to be there just because of the online
Mhm.
setting, and I met them halfway through their school year of being online and not getting to see their friends and not getting to do the 10 million things they wanted to be able to do. Um, so it was interesting to watch how my cooperating teacher was able to like dig in and get students to be a little more engaged and more motivated, but it was tough,
Sure.
and not what I expected. Like jumping in to see a bunch of well, blank screens, but also meet a bunch of students who didn't know me and had no reason to trust that the information I had to share with them was valid, other than the fact that I had the nod from their teacher. But yeah, so it was a different type of experience from what I was expecting, for sure.
Very challenging, and you, yeah, you're right. How do you, and we don't have much training teaching on Zoom, do we? You know, and but if we just keep on going back to the very core concept of, Michaela, you mentioned the word trust. How do you build trust? And if you don't build trust, then it's a little more challenging path for students to believe in you. But your ability to sort it out and figure out, however you did, with building the trust factor, um, on screen. And we still need to do that face to face. That's something that you'll see coming up quickly with your teaching, now. And but that is key, building trust. Can I trust my teacher?
Hmm. Yeah. And something I know I learned a lot from my time at Temple. Shameless plug for Temple Music Education Program. Um, something that was really, in the best way, kind of drilled into my mind as a new teacher is the importance of not only motivating your students to want to learn the content you have to offer them, but also to build that relationship with your students so they, even if they aren't invested in the subject matter at first, they can become more interested in it as, first of all, they see your passion for it, but more importantly, they get to know that you care and probably even are passionate about them and their development and their growth. That's something that I've understood to be probably the most important part of any teaching that I've done, and any teaching that I've experienced on the student side, especially at Temple with my professors there.
Well, one of the things that we need to try to establish with the students, and they're looking for this, is that their teachers care about them.
Mm-hmm.
And they also know when they're not being good. They know that. I mean, but the fact that you can still care about them and be kind to them and still hold them to a high standard, where take them where they need to be for them, but be kind about it and caring. Fast forward many years later, when you ask, the folks, think back of all the teachers that you had, and who were the ones that were the great, great teachers that made a difference in your life. And you ask, well, what made them great? What do they say? They cared about me. They cared.
Mm-hmm.
And not that they taught me all of the alternative flute fingerings or anything like that. That's great. But they really cared about me. That goes into the topic of first impressions, how important that is. First impressions, if you can have your students come away from the first day and think, wow, I think they really care about me. And for some, that is maybe rare to find someone in their family, in their life situations that really cared and was kind and believed in them when they aren't believing in themselves. That care factors and trust factors is huge, beyond what we know, because we don't know that coming in to a meeting with a child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's so important to kind of think about that care factor because I think my experience is very similar to Michaela's of kind of thinking about care and thinking about student-centered learning type of things. More and more, I've realized that I have been more flexible and changing my lessons based on what the students give me than trying to hammer through curriculum. I think at the beginning of my time, like starting out teaching, doing some of the externships we had at Temple, and even just doing like side teachings along the way, it was a lot of like if I didn't get the content, then I failed them.
Yeah.
If I didn't finish the lesson plan, if I didn't get to the end of the lesson, I failed that teaching. Whereas more and more I realized that no, at the end of the day, if I started the topic, got students thinking, and I got them talking to me, and they had fun doing it, and I could tell that they were enjoying it, even if that meant me sitting on one idea for a little bit longer than I had wanted to, or I didn't quite get to the end of my plan, but I did get to end it to a point where I felt like the students grew and the students had enjoyment doing it, and at the end of class they were kind of the chatter was kind of still there and they were still talking to me, and just that energy of the classroom feels different when you know that the students are on board with you. It's such a surreal experience that it's very hard to describe how that kind of feels like
Yeah.
because though it's busy, it's not like noisy or like interruptive. It's like there's that buzz of energy that the students have
Yes.
in conversation. And then I always like during my student teaching, most of my lessons never like panned out to quite the end. But towards the end of it, I really felt like the students knew who I was. They were coming up to me to ask me questions about things, trying to learn more about who I was and everything, and vice versa me as well, trying to learn more about them. Even within just that short period of, I believe, like 6 weeks time, I've gained so much knowledge of, oh, if I approach it from the perspective of the student and spend the first couple of days really just letting them ask me questions, letting them know who I am and what we're doing here, it makes everything else later on much easier when once they get comfortable with you and whatnot. And that was kind of one of the learning things that I gained was that idea of the lesson plan itself is almost secondary to the connections you make to the student. And though at the end of the day you should still cover content and cover the
Sure.
process of it, but it was a nice little switch that I kind of flipped on once I got to my junior senior year, and of course here in my new position, talking with new colleagues and whatnot is kind of letting them understand who I am, what I am all about, and them also telling me what they're about, which has been super helpful. I've met a lot of people within even just this past week between new faculty and returning faculty that again talking about like first day things, like going to a new college, meeting new everybody, and meeting the established folks and meeting the people who are kind of on the ground with me, and both the excitement and like the kind of fear of like, oh my god, I've never done this before, because kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit, I was the kind of the only new hire in this position who didn't have a full-time teaching position to back them up in being a professional and back them up behind their words. And I always felt like, oh, am I allowed to say this thing even though I really don't have the experience or the forethought to be a person who was talking from experience? And I'm really thankful that the position that I got into and the place that I'm at, the teachers are all very like, no, your experiences, though short, are just as influential because you kind of have that. I think you even mentioned it, Mr. Norris, that excitement. You have that energy of a new teacher. You have that new perspective that a lot
Yeah.
of the older teachers, the more experienced teachers, don't quite have, especially generational and also content specific and also looking at new information because a lot of teachers, um, I won't say a lot, but a lot of teachers end up kind of doing routine over and over again. And it works for them, but at the end of the day, you always want to adapt and evolve. And I learned that from so many of my cooperating teachers and even the professors that I had at Temple kind of ingrained that in me. Like, students first, and you have to be willing to adapt and change whatever you're doing so that students can be successful. Because at the end of the day, it is their success that matters because you're preparing them for the larger world and whatever that means to you as an individual. So,
It's you make so many great points there. Um, uh, One of the things just to hold on to that I've always thought um, is students will often forget your words to them, but they won't ever forget how you made them feel because that connects. They'll forget the words, but they'll never forget how you made them feel uh, on any given topic like that. And that's one of the things that you just outlined is that your confidence and your courage that you have within yourself to go into this new situation as a new teacher, surrounded by a lot of experience that you don't have, but your confidence within yourself that you'll find your path. And I think that is most important, where through the experience that you have uh, lived through at Temple, and all your classes and the professors that you work with, you were able to connect the dots when needed, but first make a great connection with the students, then figure out how you're going to do it and know you're going to be okay. And I think that is um, that is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah. So, Mr. Norris, we would love to know if you have any um, specific pieces of advice for people both entering or beginning their studies for music education, as well as people in the position that Jason and I are in, transitioning from the student side into the teaching side.
Into the teaching side, I think, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Um, uh, be accepting of um, the tremendous hard work that you have to do uh, to be all that you can be to inspire your students. But be kind to yourself. You're not, I know your standards are high, and I want you to be able to live with, uh, just like Jason said, I was a failure when I didn't think I could get my whole lesson done. But then you adapted and adjusted, and you were kind to yourself and say, yes, I can do this. But that's the biggest thing, because there's so much ahead of you that you don't know. And in state of Pennsylvania, um, you are given the wisdom of all the regulations and everything is you you graduate with an instructional one certificate, and it's not permanent, and it's you're given license to teach and work with young people with the knowledge that you still have a lot to grow. We all have a lot to grow, and you can't get it all done in the time that you have in your training. So you have 5 years to do that with graduate credits and all of that. Continued areas of growth that will be more focused to your needs. Be kind to yourself with that process. And then, and only then, and after then, you'll be awarded your instructional two. Your growth will be continual. So be kind to yourself, give into the process of growing, and trust yourself, you'll be all right. And you may have to adjust some schedules here and there, like um, acknowledge that I need more sleep. Take care of yourself. I think that's another big thing is be kind to yourself and be aware of uh, the needs that you need to do to yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually, so you can be the best
Mm-hmm.
for your students. And that means so many different things, uh, but be aware of that. I may need to exercise more. I may need to turn off my work and say, this is my time. I need to recharge and not feel like the work will always be there, but you must learn to take care of yourself. And my hope is along the way that you get support. You will need support in this journey of gaining your confidence. And I hope that finds you, or you find that in other people, because we lose a lot of people in our profession in the first few years because they don't find that. And uh, that's sad to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's sad to me.
Yeah, and that's something that I think both Michaela and I are still trying to figure out what it means to that self care, that kindness onto ourselves, because especially with the first year teachers, it's so daunting the task you had to forge ahead, and you always are thinking about, if I don't do this, then I didn't do enough, or
Yeah.
if I don't do this, like other teachers are doing these great things, why can't I get quite there yet? Blah blah blah, and just like constantly having that like that little thing over your shoulder telling you like, no, you should do more. You should be working right now, um, and kind of fighting that thought and being like, no, I should. This is the weekend. I am off work. Or like it's after 4 o'clock. I needed to go home. Should go to sleep, or whatever things you shouldn't be. I shouldn't be staying in my office too much longer, and just being aware of that and what that means, because it is such a sad thing to see. I've seen and heard stories of professionals leaving the field because of like they're feeling unsupported.
Burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and and uh, having the confidence in yourself is great, but sometimes you get into a teaching situation and perhaps the support is just not there. And recognizing that perhaps I'm not ever going to get the support that I wish I had in this situation. So therefore, when I said you need, be comfortable enough to go out and speak to other colleagues and say, and use this community as you're talking, lines and spaces, the community, and sharing, how are we doing? How are you doing? I'm having rough time doing this. And everyone is walking through a similar path, but it's great to share, and that you may need to get your support and from elsewhere to know that, okay,
Mhm.
I'm I'm all right. I'm not where I want to be, but I'll be all right. But feeling to it's okay to reach out and be vulnerable and chat with other people who are that could be helpful.
Yeah. And you mentioned the importance of, taking care of yourself and high expectations. And I know for Jason and I, and probably for most of our colleagues, that's what one of the big driving things in what we do is having these really great ideas and high expectations and high standards for ourselves and for our students, which is a great thing. And I'm learning that a lot of my expectations need to be adjusted to be uh, on a growth scale and being realistic. So I keep my expectations and standards pretty high, but um, in a way where it's all about moving forward and growing and getting better. So it's a little more realistic and more what teaching's all about.
Yeah, and I'll also say this is something that I've learned from talking to my new teacher colleagues. Those have years of experience, and those are relatively also new with me as well. Is creating a growth plan for yourself, and then planning out that idea of like, this year your goal is to just get through the year and maybe add one new thing that you wanted to try, and not to pile on like a, because I'm sure everyone coming out of college or coming out of getting into these new positions are like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this because I want to change that. And I definitely had that mindset going into these, both my applications for school, sorry, my applications for jobs, and then even this new position, and they were telling me those are all very exciting things, but like, realistically, are you going to be able to achieve that? And setting those goals up for yourself, and also in the idea of like planning out curriculum and stuff. I think Michaela and I are both kind of getting into that position of like planning those things out. It's like my colleagues were telling me, well, for right now, focus on getting a course syllabus made up so that parents and students can see what the course is about, and then plan out maybe your first unit, have that published on whatever resource that they can access it from, and then just plan it as you go. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of it will come, and like you'll have to adjust plans relatively quickly sometimes. So putting all that forethought sometimes isn't always worth it, especially as a first year teacher. Planning as you go, and though it could sound scary, I've been kind of been doing that a little bit more. Is okay. I currently have my syllabus are being typed up. I have week 1 stuff figured out, what activities I'm gonna do, what that's gonna look like a little bit, and I have a month goal, like the month of September for me for these classes. These are the 3 bullet point goals that I will want to reach with my class, and if I don't reach it, I'll send them back over to the October goals, and then slowly try to accumulate what that kind of looks like and figure out what I can do and what I can't do in terms of my ability and my resources. and then taking those baby steps to plan, and using what you know already, and then gaining knowledge from the experience of doing it. And then if you have opportunities for professional development and you feel like you're up to the task to do them, definitely take them up whenever they kind of appear. Because I did a lot of courses of PD over this past week, and like I was telling this earlier to both Michaela and Mr. Norris, that I was like, I felt like I was going to college again because I was sitting in a room with people on my computer, and like a specialist came in and was telling us about responsive classroom teaching and executive function when teaching lower school or elementary school individuals, and how to develop executive function within students, and what to think about when thinking about those things. And I think it's very important to kind of hear that from the new teacher perspective, and what you had said, Mr. Norris, about your experiences working with teachers going out into the field and whatnot. It's kind of that's self care, taking your time, taking those beginner steps, and not about planning your entire year ahead of you, because sadly that will probably change
Won't
as you
happen.
even as you've noticed even in
Right.
COVID and even before COVID. And kind of just to not quite wrap this up, but like talking about students who are coming into music ed, what are some thoughts that we collectively kind of have about that? And that will probably be the last topic that we touch on. Like, as this person coming into the world of music education, what are some things to be excited about, to prepare for, and what folks should be thinking about in that regard?
Well, many people come into teaching music because they were inspired and really loved a former teacher that they perhaps just had in high school and all of that, and you want to be them, which is which is great. It's deeper, deeper, and deeper, and more complex, more nuanced than that, and that's the part of uh, the discovery process which is most important. And so having one hold on to the vision, I want to be like my high school band director or my high school choir director, who had a profound influence on them, but also learning about how they got there and what did they have to do and what does it mean. I think that is a huge thing that we have to um, have people learn how to see that and analyze uh, and start building their skill set to support that vision. So hopefully that is answers, or addresses that question.
Mhm. Jason, we can't hear you.
There we go. My mic is off. Yeah. No, Mr. Norris, thank you so much for kind of saying that. And I will definitely say, from my experience, though brief in college and also getting into the field, was I definitely had the preconception that, oh, I want to be like my high school band director, because
Yeah.
he had a very profound thing on me. And then as I started learning more, I was like, well, there were some things that I kind of learned along the way that kind of developed who I was, and that really came from just exploring and not having that pinhole view, and
Yeah.
just being very open to accepting new information, accepting new tasks. And I'll always say my first day in general music class, I think MLD, or music learning and development, with Dr. Parker, was so daunting in how she taught it and what I had thought general music was, and where I ended up learning what general music is in
Yes.
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
broader scope. So
Yeah.
just being confident and being and open to just trying new things and just jumping in no matter what it is,
Hmm.
I think is super important.
But that's we only know what we have experienced at this point coming into the field. We only know what we have seen, and there's so much more. And
Hmm.
and just being open to that experience. And you're right, going into Dr. Parker's class and say, well, and she has a whole different, much wider definition of what general music is. Well, that's not what it was like in my experience. And oh, you want me to, do I have to do that? Yes, that is that's big. That's big. But That's the exciting part of it. Uh, and that's what I love about the experience at Temple, that with everyone, um, it's so broad, and it's so just so awesome, um, and inspiring.
Yeah, I think Jason and I might have touched on this in another episode, but there's nothing like the out of body experience of sitting in a, well, being in a college class for music education with Dr. Parker and kind of having this surreal moment, like laying on my back on the floor with my hands and feet in the air, and all of my classmates are doing the same thing and thinking, what's going on? As she's engaging us as if we're kindergartners.
Yeah, 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 yep.
Well,
Wow.
I guess we should about wrap up, but do you have any kind of final thoughts to kind of close us out here for audience or just for ourselves? Anything that we want to touch on briefly?
Um, there's many. There's many. Um, just in general, and just uh, there, if just to, gosh, it's the, you've heard me say that I can't imagine a better job on the planet in
Yeah.
reaching the lives of young people and having the opportunity to shape lives and influence them through the power of music. It is just the best thing ever. And I don't know how other professions work, but I know this one I hopefully will. But just the awesome responsibility that is, and how exciting it is to have that opportunity and take it very seriously, to know that you can shape so many lives in so many ways that are going to be meaningful to them, so they will go on and be better people, better citizens, better
Mhm.
inspiration to others. And that is just the best job on the planet. And I'm
Yeah.
so honored to be a part of it. And welcome anyone who, you guys are just so, we're so proud of your work and your growth in what you have done and what you're about to do, which is so, will be so influential.
Jason, I think you're still muted, but I'm gonna say, Mr. Norris, thank you so much for, first of all, for helping to prepare us to get to
Absolutely.
where we are now and to where we're going next. And thank you also for being here with us today on our podcast, with your incredible wisdom on all things music education.
Hmm.
Well, and with your permission, may I use lines and spaces um, to AML, the AML class, and our
Yes.
senior citizen, or senior citizen. I'm the senior senior seminar, because just the power of having you so immediately following into this new position, and you just have been through the path, and the inspiration is, so you can be a local hero to the students just right now, and they will turn to you as that's just giving back and making the world that much better. So with your permission,
Absolutely.
I would love to make that happen.
Definitely. And
Yes.
that's like our target audience for a lot of our episodes. And
Hmm.
there's also, we have an email that people can reach out to with any questions, whether that be like, what's your next topic going to be? Or like, how did you get to this place and what should I do to get there? We are open to any questions or comments. And all of that information is linked in wherever you're
Well,
listening or watching.
you will be an
Perfect. Oh,
inspiration. You guys will be an inspiration. Lines and Space will be an inspiration and a great resource to many. And as you continue to grow, people will grow with you. That is so exciting for me to see.
That is the goal. Yeah, thank you so much again for everything, and definitely feel free to use this resource as best as it can. It's definitely still in its development, and we have made
Yes.
many, some trips along the way as we were recording, but I think we're slowly getting into a more organized and
The hang of it,
yeah,
slowly
we're
but
getting the
surely.
hang of it. But
The
Oh,
I want
learning
to
curve.
thank both Michaela and Mr. Norris for hopping on today and doing this episode. I was super excited to kind of get into this topic, and again, Mr. Norris, your many words of wisdom and your thoughts and ideas are so profound and things that I'm still kind of processing through as we have been talking. And I'm sure the audience members will be thinking about that as well. But I do want to thank also the audience members and the listeners for this past season, for tuning in with us and kind of commenting and sharing their thoughts and reflecting with us as well. Because it's been quite the journey kind of going through the summer and now into our first position here.
Yes.
And next week will be our season finale episode for Lines and Spaces Season 2. But with that, that will be a wrap for today's episode.
great.
So, goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. I'm so
Goodbye.
honored to be a part. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Norris.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.